So now we are going to shift gears again, and I'd like to invite up our next panel, who will be taking somewhat of a futuristic look at where we all may be heading, which some are calling the metaverse. This session will be moderated by David Ryan Polgar. David is the founder of All Tech is Human, and some of you went to his mixer last night. Thank you, David, for hosting that. It's an organization, he runs an organization committed to connecting and expanding the responsible tech ecosystem, making it more diverse, multidisciplinary, and aligned with the public interest. As the leader of All Tech is Human, he has created a unique grassroots meets traditional power structure model that is uniting thousands of individuals across the globe to co-create a better tech future. So please join me in welcoming David and the rest of the panelists.
All right. I know it's getting late, so we need to re-energize this. So let's bring some energy to our panel. And that's where, first off, Stephen, thank you for the introduction and your leadership in online safety. But because it's late in the afternoon, I'm sure you've just ran off and grabbed your coffee. We want to do a little bit of vibe check, right? So we're talking for 45 minutes today around metaverse safety. Well, we want to start with you. So raise your hand if you're feeling optimistic about our ability to have a safe metaverse, right? We want to check in how you're feeling. Raise it up high. Raise your hand if you're feeling optimistic. Okay, if you're feeling optimistic, okay. We'll take those down. Now, if you're feeling pessimistic, there we go. Okay, well, it's about even. And raise both hands if you're kind of like an in-between s'mores type of peanut butter and jelly, optimistic, pessimistic. And lower your head if you invested in Meta in the last 6 months. No, I kid, I'm an optimist, so at least it's not FTX. So we want to get started here. Yeah, it's a big story. We wanted to get started around this topic. We've got some great panelists. We're going to have some riveting conversation. The reason why, I do everything with a reason. The reason why I had you raise your hands is basically because I want you to raise your hands. After about a half an hour, we're going to get into Q&A. A lot of great questions. The topic for our panel, the title is From AR to Avatars, Navigating Safety in the Metaverse. You might be thinking, well, they just use A in the alphabet. That was quite intentional as well, because we could go 26 times longer because it's such a meaty topic. But in our 45 minutes together, we're going to really focus around research, data, and then best practices. Stephanie, I know we were talking backstage about that. We want to really give a baseline, and Stephanie, we'll start with you, for the conversation. What we're going to do in the effort to be efficient is we're going to have each person give their 30-second definition of the metaverse or immersive environments. I know some people might disagree about the terminology and whether it's kind of a new Coke type of strategy. What you also want to do at the same time you're giving your definition, also tell everyone here a little bit about your background and what you're excited about. And then we'll just kind of go down the line. Stephanie, starting with you, and then Lewis.
Great, thank you, David. So I'm Stephanie Montgomery. I'm Vice President of Research and Best Practices at XRA, the XR Association. And we represent the whole ecosystem of XR technology, which is virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, and what's coming beyond all that, because we know more is on the horizon. We just recently, we build best practices for content developers. We just recently released a best practice document this month for secondary education to help guide developers of virtual and immersive experiences to better build applications for high school and middle school students. So our definition of the metaverse, which is not all there is to XR, but is a portion of it, is that it will be social, it will be interactive, and it will be persistent. On to you.
Hi, I'm Rosenberg. I've been involved in the metaverse, virtual reality, augmented reality for over 30 years. I started as a researcher at Stanford and NASA and the US Air Force. And then way back in 1993, I founded one of the early virtual reality companies, a company called Immersion Corporation, which is actually still around. I am currently the CEO of an artificial intelligence company called Unanimous AI that focuses on using AI to connect groups of people together in shared spaces. And I'm the chief scientist of the Responsible Metaverse Alliance, which is an international policy group that's focused on making a safe metaverse. As for defining the metaverse, there's lots of definitions out there. I actually like to keep it really simple and high level and say that the metaverse is the transition from today's digital world, which is based mostly on flat media viewed in the third person, to tomorrow's digital world that will be based mostly on immersive experiences in the first person. And this transition from flat media to immersive experiences is really significant. It changes the impact on people, and that's one of the reasons why safety is so important. It's also really positive because we humans were meant to understand our world in spatial environments. So it has a good reasons to be there. I also think that we have to think about the fact that when we can control the whole world around people, we give platforms potentially very significant levels of power to track people and profile people and influence people. So there's lots of interesting and complex issues that the metaverse brings up.
Tami.
I'm Tami Bhaumik. Aside from my role as board chair of FOSI, I'm also the vice president of civility at Roblox. And I'm going to start out by saying I'm not really into the word metaverse. I think that, quite honestly, as we evolve the internet, really Roblox was started back in 2006. And so we've been around for quite a while. And quite simply, we wanted to create 3D immersive spaces where people come together and share experiences. And it's simply that. There are a lot of different ways that you can experience different shared experiences. One is AR, one is VR. There are many different access points, but we also believe that in order to access all of these different spaces, you have to be able to access it from any device, any browser, from anywhere in the world, regardless of device or browser. It is a place where people can go to learn, to game, to be educated, to have fun. And right now, we're in the very, very beginning stages, which is the reason why I am personally so optimistic about the opportunity. We've learned a lot in Web 1 and Web 2. Let's take those learnings and apply it to this next iteration of the internet, where we can have a much more civil, optimistic place to come together. If anything, the last 2 years has shown us that people need connection. They need connection in the physical world, and they also need connection in the online world. And the opportunities that this world provides is pretty incredible, as long as the foundation is based on safe and civil presence.
Kristina.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Kristina Podnar, excited to be here with you today, mostly because I have a lot of gray going on. And as my colleagues are talking about Web 1, Web 2 learnings, I was actually there to learn a lot from Web 1 and making a lot of the mistakes before we moved on, so I can personally attest to them. We made mistakes. I am actually the Global Digital Policy Advisor at XRSI, the Extended Reality Safety Initiative. Our entire objective at XRSI is to ensure that the metaverse and extended reality will be safe. They will be providing privacy, and we will actually have inclusivity and accessibility for everyone. So we're very concerned about that. The thing that sets us apart from other organizations is we've moved on from talking about being concerned about this, and we've actually started to create solutions. So we have privacy and safety framework that's actually available to everybody to adopt today. We're actually using a second version of it soon. We have child online protection, privacy, safety frameworks as well. And we also launched last year the Metaverse Reality Check, which I chair. It is the first global oversight formed by the citizen. And so we actually have the citizens involved in a safe metaverse as we define it. In terms of how I personally define the metaverse, I agree with all of my colleagues. I think what's interesting to me is to say not just the words, though, immersive and 3D. I think it's really helpful to think about the type of technologies we need to realize the metaverse. So when we start talking about the metaverse, the reason I don't believe that we're there yet today, even though headlines say that we are, is because in our definition, I'm thinking we need 5G, right? Unilateral 5G, which a lot of spaces still lack. We definitely need AR, we need VR, we need blockchain, we need NFTs, we need cryptocurrency, which everybody's reading about in the headlines today. We need a lot of things that we don't have today, including really awesome and much better performing hardware. And so we're not there yet. We are heading there swiftly. And I think this is a really great time to be talking about the risks and the opportunities, right? Because we have both that are coming our way, and how we're going to ensure that we have privacy, safety, and inclusivity built in for everybody, as well as protection of human rights, which I don't think we have guaranteed at this moment in time.
We're going to build off, Kristina, what you said for our kind of first real question. Tami, might as well start with you on this, since you mentioned Web 2.0, right? What do you think, and it's for everyone to jump in as well, what do you think we can learn from Web 2.0, if you will, towards this march, potentially towards a more immersive type of environment? In addition, what type of kind of unique characteristics would this immersive environment have that are going to be potentially more challenging from a safety perspective? Give it a little context. I know there was a TikTok video not that long ago where it showed moderation in the metaverse, and it was a real struggle because they had the moderator kind of running around, so it was kind of played for comedy, but it showcased the complexity when you move it into a different dimension. So Tami, what have we learned from Web 2.0?
So, one of the things that we're seeing, and this is, I would have to say that my colleagues at other platforms would probably agree, that there is a lack of education. And what we're learning from Web 2, and hopefully as we evolve into Web 3, education for communities, education for parents and teachers is critical. We need digital literacy in order for people to access the controls, the tools, the count restrictions that every platform actually has available, but it's literally single digits of people who actually use it. So that's like step one.
Yeah.
I think that's really an important fact as we move into this next iteration, that there's a uniform learning that goes about. Now, the challenge of getting there, that's a challenge, right? Across socioeconomic lines. Yeah. It's easy for all of us in this room to say, yes, we need that. It's all easy for us. We have access to all of the smartest people in the room here. We have access to the internet. We have access to tools, but we are a mere fraction of the world. Yeah. And so that is something that is a huge challenge.
Okay. I'd like anyone else to jump in if they have any ideas. Lewis.
Yeah, I think that one of the big things I would hope we would learn from Web 2 is that even if we have kind of utopian aspirations, business models can send things in the wrong direction or unexpected direction. And social media is a great example to give us some insight into what could go wrong with the metaverse. In the world of social media, 15 years ago, we all believed it was a utopian technology, bring people together, give voice to the voiceless, drive democracy. It actually did all those things. At the same time, business models evolved that drove large platforms to really focus on tracking people, profiling people, and targeting people with content. It wasn't malicious, it was just a reasonable business model that created all these unexpected problems with misinformation, disinformation, segregating populations, driving polarization. If we look to the metaverse, we're going to have a world where large platforms are not just going to track where you click and who your friends are. They could literally track where you are, what you're doing, what direction you're looking, how long your gaze lingers on something. They can track the speed of your gait. They can track your emotion. They can track everything. And so we're going to a world where large platforms will be able to track literally everything you do and say, and now with facial recognition and emotion detection, be able to track how you feel while doing it. That's a big step more intimate in terms of the amount of data collected than social media. And if these platforms end up going in a direction where they're tracking and profiling people with that level of information, and then use it to target people with content, targeted content in the metaverse isn't going to be pop-up ads and videos. Targeted content is changing the world around you. And we're going to a place where a platform can track everything you do and then change the world around you. That's a dangerous thing unless there are guardrails in place. And hopefully Web 2 will teach us, hey, we should think ahead rather than wait for the problems to emerge, because once those problems emerge, it's very hard to undo them.
Louis, if you don't mind me drilling down on that, do you think that, I mean, you mentioned a lot of potential downsides. Do you think that in itself is something that we would have to get right from a safety perspective in order for people to want to be more attracted to the very concept of the metaverse? Because you mentioned just this idea of this kind of hyper tracking. You would think that safety precaution would affect its overall kind of adoption from the public standpoint.
So I personally think the adoption is inevitable, and I say that because, again, we humans are meant to perceive information spatially. We're not meant to look down at a little screen. And I think 10 years from now, we'll look back, we'll watch movies from today and say, look at all these people walking down the street staring at their phone, and think that's ridiculous when with augmented reality, content will just be around people. And so I think we're going in that direction. I do think that that large platforms could easily lose trust if things are not safe. And so, and that's another thing we can learn from Web 2, which is once a platform loses trust, very hard to get it back. And in the metaverse, if people start to feel like, hey, you can track my facial expressions and it's being used in a way that I'm not comfortable with, they will lose trust, and it will be very hard to get it back. So I do think that the proliferation will happen. Whether or not there's trust and people feel good about it really depends on how this gets rolled out in the near term.
But to be fair, there's the TED Talk that Google Glass had, a bunch of years ago when they released it on this inevitability, and that didn't necessarily play out. But we want to move on to this idea of future casting. Stephanie, we'll start with you, right? Where do you think this very concept of immersion or the metaverse is going to go? If we're just looking towards the near future, not too far in the future, let's just try to look ahead maybe 3 or 4 years. What's it going to look like?
So let me move this into the enterprise a little bit. I know we're families here, but just to give you all some context, Walmart has put 1.5 million people in headsets to do training for their sales associates. Our kids will be seeing this technology in the workplace in the future, right? So right now, Accenture, which is a consulting company, onboarded 35,000 people last year during COVID in VR headsets, and they've built a metaverse, which is their private metaverse called the Nth Floor, and they use that for their multinational organization to build community, have places to meet, and things like that. We will see more of that going forward as we use this technology. And to your point with the full potential, the headsets will get lighter and lighter, glass will get thinner, and we will be, with our heads-up display, meeting with people with photorealistic avatars. We see that already. Microsoft has a Starlight project that has it's like a video chat, but with a hologram. I say that, they don't say it's a hologram, but I like it that way. And so you really have presence. So imagine using that technology to have your kids meet their grandkids all the way across the country, right? If we'd had that during COVID, how amazing would that have been to be able to continue to build those connections? That's in the works now. They're prototyping that now.
Yeah.
So we're going to see that in the near future. It's not so long.
Okay. Kristina, let's bring you in. Where does the near future look like for this immersive?
I think the near future isn't as sci-fi as we think it is, right? So I think, again, going back to some of the components we need for the metaverse to really happen, I don't think we're evolving fast enough to get there. I think what we're going to see improvements on what we already see today, right? So we actually have these really crazy Oculus headsets. People are like, you just look weird running around with those, right? My son laughs at me already, and it's not even 2030 yet. So we're going, and we're talking about things like, okay, we're not going to have that, we're going to have glasses. I think we're going to get to the point where we're having contact lenses instead, right? And I think that we're going to have contact lenses that aren't just there for the sake of contact lenses and being able to read your email. I think we're going to have things like the ability to change your prescription in the moment if you have something like Sjögren's and dry eyes, and a prescription that changes throughout the day. And so I think we can look for really good use cases that are highly practical, but kind of boring for everybody who's thinking like, wow, this is going to be really exciting. They're boring use cases. I think that's really what we're talking about in the short term. I think there's a lot of use cases for military. I think we're going to continue to see the very boring use cases in the school environment where the kids are able to travel to different countries, experience different languages and different cultures and context. So again, nothing really exciting in the next 4 to 5 years per se. I think when we look further out is where we get to really more exciting things, because we're going to have more of the capabilities. We're going to have more of the IoT connectivity, the speed and the platforms that are going to make us not just look like crazy avatars that don't have limbs, right? But we're actually going to start to feel and sense the reality of really what virtual reality is, right? We're going to be immersed in it. It's going to be more specific to us. It's going to become more persistent in that context. But I think we're not there yet. And I think that going back to one point that you asked earlier, which is, we have this window of opportunity, I think, and this is really a good call to action, which is things are moving really fast. We're not moving as fast in terms of the policy front, but we have a little bit of time to do catch up, and this is the time. I think if we wait for 4 to 5 years until the technology really gets there and it starts to move even faster, it's going to be too late to act on the risks, because as Louis mentioned, we're going to be so immersed already into what we're using these technologies for, but it's also going to be a little bit too late to post-bake things into the system.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to merge tech company ideas, and you're going to have to pay $8 a month if you want limbs. But Tami,
We have limbs.
They'll charge you an arm and a leg.
Yes, they charge you an arm and a leg. Tami, we're talking about online safety. We really want to transition the conversation that way. So I'm going to start with you on the question of, when we're thinking about this immersive environment, both sides of the coin, right? What gets you excited about it from an online safety perspective, and what makes you nervous, if you will?
So I am very optimistic about our future, because every day I'm working with some of the smartest engineers in our company, and we're taking a look at ways to improve and exact emotion, human emotion, right? So as I focus on civility and advocating for new tools, policies, et cetera, that is going to make the Roblox community more civil. There's a lot of research that still needs to be done. Lots, and I've talked to many of you today about potentially launching different research into different areas on how to promote civility in the online world. But I also think that, for example, in real life, if I've said something mean and I hurt your feelings, you're going to look at me and I can see it in your eyes. I can see your eyebrows go down. I can see if there are social cues that we all have that indicate to me that I've done something wrong. And if we can communicate that through technology into the online world and translate that to where we're giving social cues to people online when they've stepped over the line, when they've made somebody happy, when they've given something to somebody else that promotes well-being. That's really, really, really powerful. And we see it every day. There's opportunities for self-expression, which is still such a huge part of the 3D immersive online world, is self-expression. People go to the online world. There's tremendous opportunity to be somebody else, to dress differently. Maybe you're shy in the real world. We see this with a lot of junior high school kids, where they don't have the confidence, they don't have the self-confidence to wear a certain outfit, because in real life, people perceive them a certain way. But in Roblox or in an online environment, they can put on a cool leather jacket that they may not have available to them, either because they can't afford it, or maybe it provides a different perspective, right? So I think there are a lot of different opportunities. We have a feature called layered clothing, where it literally looks like you can layer different things on, and you can be who you really aspire to be. So I think there's a lot of optimism in that world.
Well, Tami, if I can quickly just drill down on that, it kind of reminded that famous New Yorker cartoon where it says nobody knows your dog online, right? And this idea that online kind of environments were supposed to be conducive for expanding creativity and maybe understanding ourselves, especially if you're talking about a younger audience. I'd just be very curious of how does that dovetail with concerns in the safety space? Because there's always discussions around anonymity and pseudonymity. How does it change behavior? So do you have any kind of thoughts on that in terms of does it have to be connected with that person's true identity?
So I think that there's a lot of tests going on right now, not only through Roblox, but a lot of different platforms. We just saw a presentation on age assurance, right? So what have we learned from that research? No one has nailed it yet. So honestly, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of connecting responsibility to that individual. But I do think that a lot of the different platforms out there are being very responsible for moderating between a combination of AI, smart AI, and then also human moderators. I don't think it can be one or the other. I think it always has to be a layering effect and a combination of both. But I do, it's about scaling that and scaling it quickly.
I think there's context too.
Okay, well,
right?
expand on that.
Because you present yourself maybe, or I present myself in this environment, but I present myself also as a parent. I present myself as a game player, right? And so I actually have multiple personas on Discord alone, right?
Yeah.
And in Roblox, I can have multiple personas depending on which environment I've gone into, right?
But what's interesting there, right, is at the end of the day, you're still Stephanie. Right, and so if I look around the room, I would love to know how many of you do not have an identification. Like, is anybody really anonymous? Right, no matter where you were born, what country you come from, whatever name you choose, however you want to present yourself, we all have an identity. We always know that if I hit you or if I do even something worse to you, there are consequences and my identity is known either in this room or outside of this room. And so I think it's interesting that no matter what persona we want to be, whether you're a mom or you're on a panel or you're in an audience or you're having tea or coffee, you're still Stephanie, right? And is that what we need to have in the metaverse? And I would argue, yes, there actually has to be a tie back to identity. Otherwise, really bad things happen without consequences.
Kristina, to dig on that, how do you think we should best communicate that to the audience in the sense that you might be anonymous to other individuals on that platform, but you're not anonymous to the platform, right? How do you think that can best be communicated? What are the best practices for that?
Yeah, I think, and this kind of goes back to your point, Stephanie, I think, which is having different personas and different contexts. Like, I'm on stage right now, I'm choosing to be a public figure. You're broadcasting this out into the world. I know everybody on the internet can understand that I'm Kristina Podnar and this is me. Hi, how are you? Right? But when I'm hanging out with my son at night in his room, just talking about his day, how things were going, I don't want that broadcast to everybody. I don't want that information out there. So I think we need to be able to layer on again the privacy protections, if you will, to understand context, because context matters. It's about the times when you're comfortable exposing who you are or information about yourself or those around you and the setting that you're in. And then there's times where it's like, no, I just really want to be that private person. And so you should have fundamental rights, human rights, and that needs to actually be layered in. But those also have to be balanced against the rights of society and the rights of the individual. And so that's really, I think, the push and pull of technology. And we don't have the perfect answer. If we did, I would be retired and probably waving to you from a beach somewhere right now. So I don't have the answer. But what I do know is that it's fairly complex. We're looking into it. And from an XRSI perspective, we're actively advising companies on the different scenarios, the different personas, and what are the best practices, because we're working with individuals and doing research to understand how can we embed that into technology so that, again, the individual rights are protected while we're still allowing for things like economic development, business flourishing, et cetera. There has to be that right balance.
Okay. Louis and Stephanie, I want to quickly bring you in, and then we're going to move on to audience questions in just about a minute. So the idea that going to this Web 3.0, if you will, it sometimes seems like almost like a reset or a mulligan where you're saying, all right, well, we kind of screwed it up before, let's do a better job this time. So what policies do you think need to be put in place for us to have a safer, immersive environment or metaverse? I want to hear from you, and then Stephanie.
Sure. So, I mean, to me, it's not so much of a reset, but an expansion, meaning we're going from a world, a flat world to an immersive world. And in order to do that, we're going to allow third parties to track all kinds of additional information about us, our behavioral information, our emotional information, and there's good reason for it. I mean, Meta just launched their new headset that can track your emotions, your facial emotions. There's really good reasons for that. It could allow your avatars to look more expressive. As Tami says, that shows your empathy or it evokes empathy. There's reasons for that. The big question to me is, are we going to put guardrails in place where consumers, users, can feel comfortable that data, while it's potentially very useful in real time, is not going to be stored over time and is not going to be used to profile people? Because if you can profile me based on everything I'm doing, where I am, what I'm looking at, and again, with augmented reality, that's in the real world too. I could be walking down the street in the real world and slow down and look in a store window, and you'll know I slowed down, you'll know what I looked at. And if you also are looking at my facial expressions and my micro expressions and my pupil dilation, all of which you can track, you will know everything I did and exactly how I felt while doing it throughout my entire day. You can then build not just a behavioral profile, but an emotional profile that knows how this person will react in every situation, and you could then use that to target them with content that will be extremely influential. It will make today's social media content look, benign. And so, to me, the big types of protections are saying, okay, platforms are going to get this huge leap in power. There needs to be guardrails in place about what they can store when it comes to behavioral information, what they can store when it comes to emotional information, and what they can use that information for. It's absolutely these emotional content to make your avatar look better, great. But if you're engaged in an interactive advertisement in the metaverse, and maybe it's a virtual spokesperson that's, you're engaged in a promotional conversation, do you want that AI-driven avatar to be looking at your facial expressions and adapting its tactics in real time? Do you want it to be looking at your pupil dilation and adapting its tactics in real time? These things will happen unless there's guardrails put in place that says, hey, the metaverse increases the power that platforms have by an order of magnitude, and we can't just wait and see what happens and then think we can roll back those dangers.
Okay. We're going to start moving on to Q&A, but just Stephanie, do you have any quick thoughts for 30 seconds to add on to that before we get into the questions? Or
Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about a lot that we maybe didn't do so well or still aren't doing so well is the DEINA, the accessibility component. So we work hard to get the word out there and start working today on making these devices and these experiences accessible and accessible by design. Talking about captioning in virtual environments. Blind people like to use this stuff too. Audio cues are a big deal. So we focus on that as well, and looking forward into making that happen. Yeah.
All right, so now that's why I had you raise your hands. Let's start getting into questions. We have microphones in both corners. All right, so raise your hand if you have a question for one or the entire panel, and then the microphone will start moving in your direction, and then we will do our best to answer this. Yeah. Michael. We got the mediatrician.
We've talked a lot today and at many of our meetings about the mistakes made in Web 1.0 and 2.0. And we've talked about all the mistakes we've made in design and everything that happens behind the Gorilla Glass. We have not, I think that our biggest mistakes in Web 1.0 and 2.0 was what was on the other side of the Gorilla Glass. We are not educating and empowering us all to be effective users of this. We're making assumptions that we need to be protected by industry, that we need to, but we have a part in this too, particularly because we're creating in it as well as receiving it. And I think we've got to move our thinking ahead beyond the days of television where that was the only screen in our lives and it was all the fault of the television and what it was pushing at us. We're part of this. And how can we, I want to hear from you innovators, how we can be better citizens in this immersive environment.
Thank you. Well, Tami, I know you were talking a lot about education. Do you have any kind of thoughts from that?
I do. And honestly, it's what keeps me up at night. So when I talk to parents, and there are many teachers in the room, when I talk to parents and I go, do you know anything about Roblox? Do you know? And this is the physical reaction I get is, oh, I don't know. And that's not okay, right? That's not okay anymore. We have to encourage parents to be able to lean in. We have to be able to give them the tools and the education. And that includes teachers, right? Just because you're a teacher, you're so overwhelmed trying to teach the requirements that you're required to teach. How do you have the time to learn about digital media literacy and then be able to guide your students, especially when your students get into problems with cyberbullying or other things or seeing inappropriate content online? And everybody says, if you see something bad or you see something inappropriate, go to a trusted parent or a teacher. How do we train those parents and teachers to be able to guide this next generation? So truly, I think the opportunity and the necessity is that we need to up our game in terms of figuring out how to scale the content, provide tools, and again, across socioeconomic lines, where every parent, every teacher can get access to that content and have it at their fingertips, so that as we get through this as we start immersing ourselves into Web3, we're ready.
And I think, just really quickly to go back to your point, I think it's actually trying to actually ask the question, what are we not thinking about actively and what are we not doing, right? Because one of the things we have learned from Web 1 and Web 2 is we can do anything, but just because we can do it doesn't mean we ought to do it, right? And so even asking the questions of should we do it, is this the right thing? And I've heard a lot of people say today things like privacy by design, safety by design. I'm all about that. I think that's great. But even privacy by design and safety by design doesn't matter if we don't do things like onboarding. And I keep saying the word onboarding, but we honestly have to onboard children, educators, parents, citizens, me. We have to onboard to all of these new technologies, and we have to understand the implications of that. And that's a large feat, because what we're doing is we're building the airplane while it's flying, right? Because we're all building the content, we're all contributing to what's happening next, and we're also trying to educate ourselves. And so I would like to say probably that first, you're here today, so yay, kudos for that. You're thinking about it, but I think we need to think larger, harder, faster about onboarding. I think we need to not just put the onus on teachers. It's really great that teachers are part of the solution. They're not the solution. And I'm wondering about things like, where's the Department of Education? Where's the onboarding and the resources beyond the teachers? Because you're right, they have 372 things to do, and this is one more. And so what are we providing? But I think thinking about it in not a scary, boo, kind of Halloween type of thing, but really thinking about how do we all onboard, how do we do it together, and how do we do it, back to your point, Tami, of people that don't have a voice, that aren't around the table today, that aren't with us. I just came back from the first Arab SME Summit in Jordan, where the majority of people are worried about, like, how do I put food on my table, and how do I pay the rent? And the last thing that they're thinking about is, like, how do I onboard into the metaverse? That is not a thought they have. They're like, I would like my child to eat today instead. And so I think we need to really stop and think about that for ourselves, for others, and sometimes just be quiet and observe and ask the question, and then go from there.
Can I add one other thing?
Please, Tami. No.
The thing that I heard that was so poignant today is we cannot build the next iteration for the internet for young people without young people. And I think that is the most important thing, is we need to hear their voices. We're all old. We don't know what, how do we build something that we're not even gonna really use? This next generation is gonna be immersed in it.
Well, that's where a lot of people mention not about us, without us, right? But we want to move on to the next questions. We see a hand, two in the center, if we want to take over the microphone. Whoever the microphone gets first. Oh, there we go. Please, and then also if you want to give your name and affiliation, I think that can be helpful as well.
Ian Corby from the Age Verification Providers Association. There seem to be two schools of thought about the metaverse. Either it should be this brave new world free of all the constraints of our existing human world, or we should perhaps try to embed some of the social norms and protections that we find in our day-to-day lives, in our virtual lives. Which way do you think we should go?
Good question. Lewis, I think you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think I think it's a mix. And on one side, the metaverse opens up all kinds of creative opportunities and expands. It should expand what it means to be human, because it's giving these creative abilities in our world, both the completely simulated worlds and in augmenting the real world. On the other side, if people behave poorly in these worlds, it will be nobody's going to want to inhabit them. And an interesting way, an interesting thought experiment that I often do is say, if you look around this room, one day the metaverse could look this real, like this could be the metaverse. And in today's world, in this real world, when we all got up on stage, none of us worried that somebody was going to stand up and start being offensive in this room. That wasn't our worry. If this was the metaverse, maybe we'd be worried about that. And part of that is, the social norms don't necessarily exist in the metaverse that keeps this a civil place. The other is the issue we brought up, which is persistent identity. People are well behaved in the real world because there's persistent identity, there's not anonymity. If this was the metaverse, unless it has some of these features of the real world, we don't know that people are going to be well behaved. And you can't expect platforms to moderate behavior in the real world. A platform, again, this could be the metaverse. A platform can't know if somebody does something offensive at one of these tables in an easy way. So social norms and some of these social constructs like persistent identity are ultimately going to be important for a metaverse that we think of as trusted.
Okay. We have 3 minutes left. We want to have one rapid fire, quick question, then a quick response.
Hello, everybody. My name's Matthew. I'm here with TikTok. My question is about the metaverse today. I think we kind of have to accept that we're in the 80s car phone era a little bit. But at the same time, as somebody who was a child of Call of Duty, voice comms and 4chan, I feel like if you go into VR chat, you're not seeing something too different. And so as I'm hearkening back to that weird anonymous time, it feels like today we are shaping what this looks like. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these ideas are built on the foundation of it not imploding today. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do we keep the metaverse today working? How do we take the lessons from Web 2.0 and actually practically be applying them so that we don't suddenly pull the plug on the experiment because we saw what that Wild West looked like, and it wasn't that pretty.
Yeah, it does seem to be a very kind of pivotal juncture that we're at. Who would like to take us home with that question?
I'll try that one if it's okay.
Stephanie.
So I'm going to say it's an evolution, right? It's not an implosion. It's more like a giant experiment that's evolving over time. So we are seeing the really positive use cases for this technology in the enterprise space, et cetera, right? So it's not going to go away. I think you're going to see people learn the behaviors and norms, the onboarding processes. They're going to get better about it. Right now, as you said, Louis, moderation is really hard to do in a lot of alt space. They do it manually with people. Like people are actually there to assist people who come in and like misbehave and behave poorly, right? But that will change over time. AI will get better. It'll get scary before it gets better, I suspect, but it will get better.
But we also do have a lot of content moderation folks here who know that we've kind of overpromised on AI over the years, and we've needed human moderation. So be kind of curious.
But it's going to evolve, right? Okay. It's going to be an evolution. So it's all coming. So I'm not sure you're going to actually see an implosion as much as a transformation, maybe. Okay. Think of it like a butterfly.
Okay. Any additional thoughts? Tami, you seem pensive on this.
So I think that, over-dramatizing it one way or the other way is maybe not the accurate way of looking at it. I do agree with Stephanie that I think it is an evolution. In a lot of ways, we're flying the plane as we're building it. I think that you wouldn't be here right now if you didn't care about safety and civility in the online world. And I think that we are all trying to do the best that we can. I do think that applying old norms, old policies in the physical world to this new world is the wrong way of going about it. I do think that we need to take a look at how we're evolving it and apply new policies across the board because it is different, and I see it every day. I talk to our very smart policy people, and they're hearing that a lot of policies are being developed based on old assumptions.
Yeah.
And so I think that as we move forward, the opportunity really to create a framework that is new and productive, there's a huge opportunity there.
Well, Tami, that's a great way to end the conversation. So let's give a round of applause to our incredible panel. But also just quickly, I want to give a round of applause, not a joke, to everyone here, because it's got to be said that this is very hard work. Everyone is making it their life's purpose to tackle wicked problems. So give a round of applause to everyone else in the room. And thank you. Thank you.